Everyone. Can you hear me okay? A little thumbs up.
Yep,
Perfect. Great,
sounds
great.
good.
Awesome. Thank you very much. My name is Bree Rossiter. I am the Conservation Program Manager for the Lake Winnipesaukee Alliance. I also want to thank the Moultonborough Cyanobacteria Committee for proposing this virtual presentation. Their continued leadership and interest in community education really made this event possible. So just a few quick housekeeping notes. If you could, please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. That would be great. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat. This is being recorded. Our LWA staff member, John, will be monitoring the chat as we move through the presentation, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. Like I said, this presentation is being recorded and it will be available on the Lake Winnipesaukee Alliance's YouTube page at the end of the week. So without further ado, let's jump in. So I'm with the Lake Winnipesaukee Alliance. We are formally known as the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. We were founded by volunteers in 1976, and we are the only organization that is solely focused on protecting Lake Winnipesaukee and its watershed. Our change to the name Alliance really reflects the collaboration among property owners, businesses, municipalities, and all lake users. When I started with LWA almost 4 years ago now, we used to say that we were doing this work for future generations, but that isn't the case anymore. The challenges that we're facing and that the lake is facing is immediate, and the need for action is really greater than ever. So how do we protect the lake? In a variety of ways. We protect the lake through lake management. We develop science-based plans that are addressing the full watershed, not just the shoreline area. These plans identify pollution sources and help to guide long-term protection efforts. We also coordinate the water quality monitoring program on Lake Winnipesaukee. The University of New Hampshire established this program 40 years ago. And over just the last 10 years, we have been able to increase our monitoring sites from around 34 in 2015 to over 60 in 2024. Third is restoration. So these action plans, these lake management plans serve as a roadmap to be able to prioritize public sites that are in need of remediation. Projects include things like culvert replacements, shoreline revegetation, and there is a project map on our website that you can go to. It is interactive. You can click on the points to show you where the restoration projects that we've identified are located. There's some additional information in that map as well. One thing to note is that restoration map is only showing projects that we have completed sub-watershed management plans for to date. We have 3 plans ongoing right now. One is for the Broads, one is for Alton Bay, and one is for Center Harbor. And we will also be working on updates to the Paugus Bay watershed management plan, Sanders Bay, and Waukee 1 as well. Lastly, it's education and outreach, things like tonight or presentations to homeowners associations, conferences, and different community events throughout the year. Additionally, we have helped to establish the Cyanobacteria committees in Moultonborough and also in Meredith. And I sit on both of those committees and am actively involved in Wolfboro Waters, which is another town committee. So really, LWA serves as a link that ties our lakefront communities together, and we have one unified mission to be able to protect our watershed. People love Winnipesaukee for a variety of reasons: the boating, the fishing, the wildlife, the scenic beauty, and the memories that are made with family and friends on the lake over the years. So everyone that loves the lake should take steps to protect it, and every set of eyes on the water makes a difference when it comes to spotting early signs of cyanobacteria and helping to keep the lake safe for people, pets, and wildlife. Okay. So I gave a presentation at the Loon Preservation Committee in October of 2024. We covered the basics of cyanobacteria, what they are, and why they matter. This presentation was recorded and is also available on our YouTube page. So today I'm going to give you a very brief introduction of the basics of cyanobacteria and then go over how to identify cyanobacteria and what to do if you suspect a bloom. Cyanobacteria are naturally occurring microorganisms. They were formerly referred to as blue-green algae because of their superficial appearance and how they look, but they're not algae at all. They are photosynthetic bacteria. They've been around for over 2 billion years, and they actually help to be able to shape the Earth's atmosphere. In fact, cyanobacteria are believed to be some of the first organisms that were capable of photosynthesis using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce energy and releasing oxygen into the atmosphere, really paving the way for a more complex life on Earth. So while today cyanobacteria get some really bad press for causing blooms, they've played a major role in the evolution of life. They're also incredibly resilient. They've been found in some of the harshest environments on Earth, things like hot springs that are over 150 degrees Fahrenheit, dry deserts, salty flats, and in Antarctic lakes. There are thousands and thousands of species of cyanobacteria, and that resilience really helps to explain why they're able to persist in our lakes today. They're very adaptable. There are three main growth factors to know when it comes to cyanobacteria. The first is sunlight. So just like plants, like I said, cyanobacteria need light to be able to photosynthesize. Second is water temperature. They grow best in warm waters, somewhere between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And then third is nutrients, especially phosphorus. And that is a limiting nutrient, meaning that in the environment, it is found in very small amounts naturally, but it enters into our systems through things like polluted stormwater runoff or failing septic systems or fertilizer. So the concerns that we have are not with the cyanobacteria itself, but the ability for these cyanobacteria to produce a bloom, which is the rapid increase in the population of these cyanobacteria in a water body, attributed to those three growth factors I listed: sunlight, water temperature, and nutrients. Several types of algae and bacteria can create these harmful algal blooms. Those in freshwaters are most dominated by cyanobacteria like Dolichospermum or Microcystis. And then there's marine toxic HABs as well. So those are mostly dinoflagellates, things like the Florida red tide or Karenia brevis. It's really important to note that not all harmful algal blooms are toxic, but also there is no distinct way to be able to tell if a bloom is toxic or not. There are some quick toxin tests on the market, but unfortunately, they are just not very reliable. And there is no quick fix for these cyanobacteria blooms. This slide shows some photos of the red tide in Tampa, Florida in 2021 on the bottom right. This is Lake Winnipeg in 2023 and a Microcystis bloom in Ohio in 2019. So why are we seeing these blooms more often? Climate change is significantly impacting our lakes. We have increased extreme weather events. So more frequent storms lead to heightened runoff and erosion. That runoff introduces pollutants and phosphorus-rich sediment into our lakes. And these nutrients, like phosphorus, can help to be able to fuel these cyanobacteria blooms that we're seeing. The top right shows a photo of the really heavy storms that we got in July of 2023. This is a photo from Alton, and it's a little difficult to tell, but there is a tributary stream over here on the right side. So any of that sediment off of this road, any of the dirt, any of the polluted stormwater runoff that has accumulated during that storm is entering into that tributary and then entering into Lake Winnipesaukee. Second piece of the climate change is warming temperatures and lake stratification. So in the summer, our lake forms three very distinct layers. There's a warm surface layer called the epilimnion. There's a cool layer called the metalimnion, and then a colder bottom layer called the hypolimnion. Normally, our lake mixes or turns over twice a year in fall and spring because of prior to these distinct layers forming, which redistributes oxygen and nutrients throughout the water column. However, when we have warmer temperatures, that can delay that turnover process, which can increase the harmful algal bloom risk and also stress aquatic life. An extended stratification period, having those distinct layers, allows these nutrients to be able to build up in those bottom layers. And then when turnover eventually happens, those nutrients can help trigger blooms, especially in late fall. Lastly, shifts in ice in and ice out dates. Warmer winters are helping to alter freeze-thaw cycles on our lake. So in 2024, Lake Winnie experienced record low ice coverage. There was only 37 days between ice in and ice out. And in seeing from Dave Emerson, really, there was only 1 day of full ice coverage on the lake last year. Now, in 2024, Winnipesaukee also saw the highest number of blooms that have ever been recorded. And there's a correlation there. Less ice equals more sunlight equals more potential for cyanobacteria and algae and plants to grow earlier in the season. This is a photo around March of 2024 in this top left photo right here. And the bottom right is for 2023. So you can really see the vast difference in ice coverage for Lake Winnipesaukee between those 2 years. I am hopeful that the freeze, the deep freeze, the real winter that we had this year is going to reduce the bloom potential, especially in early spring. But lasting improvement really depends on more than just the climate. We need to address things like land use and human disturbance, things like increased impervious surfaces, a loss of natural vegetation, and shrinking vegetated buffers around our water bodies. These all contribute to those excess nutrients being able to enter the lake. So even a cold winter can't undo the impacts of runoff or shoreline development or poor or outdated stormwater management, but planning and stewardship can. That is why those watershed management plans are so important. So now that we've covered kind of what's causing these blooms, let's take a quick look at what they actually look like and how to identify them. Cyanobacteria blooms can take on a really wide variety of appearances, which can sometimes make it really tricky to identify. What you're seeing on this slide are just a few examples. Some cyanobacteria blooms are really obvious. They're thick, bright green, almost paint-like scums on the surface, or look like pea soup. Others are a lot more subtle. So their color can range from bright green to blue-green, sometimes even yellow or white streaks across the water, depending on what stage the bloom is at. In some cases, you might see flecks or particles suspended in the water or some cloudy patches that, maybe just be a little bit discolored or pale. Cyanobacteria blooms also don't always float on the surface. Some blooms can be dispersed at various depths throughout the water column, especially when it comes to species like Gliotrichia, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But really, the key takeaway here is that there is no single way that a bloom looks. Also, these are all examples from 2024 on Lake Winnipesaukee. These are more examples from Lake Winnipesaukee. These are examples just showing what blooms looked like from June 12th to June 24th on 2024, which is when we really saw the record number of blooms on Winnie. So here are some more examples of what cyanobacteria can look like. Again, you'll notice that diversity. Some are forming these really, really thick mats or streaks in the surface, or others are patchy, more dispersed, even looking like floating pollen in some areas. What's really interesting about this is that these are all the same type of cyanobacteria. All of these blooms were dominated by a taxa of cyanobacteria called Dolichospermum. Something else to note is that some types of cyanobacteria don't create these really large, obvious surface scums, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're harmless or insignificant. These species also go unnoticed because of where they grow, but they're still capable of producing toxins just like all the other cyanobacteria blooms. And under the right conditions, they can pose risks. So for example, this bottom left photo of the Winnipesaukee River, we found Anabina and Formidium, which are two different taxa. These species don't always bloom in the classic sense. Sometimes they're suspended in the water column or attached to the bottom, but again, they're still important to monitor. Another group called Stigonema thales, what we call, or what lands in the benthic cyanobacteria category, meaning bottom. It means they grow attached to the bottom of the water rather than floating freely or on the top of the water. We've observed these in areas like Paugus Bay in 2023, Pendleton Beach in 2017, and Camp Winnipesaukee in 2020. These benthic forms can build up over time. Sometimes they're blending in with native algae, which makes them really, really hard to spot sometimes. But when conditions are right, especially with some strong wind action or wave action, they can break loose from the bottom and wash up on shore in clumps or mats. And so this photo in the top left is showing all of this material from Pendleton Beach that, without knowing necessarily what it is, residents ended up raking it so they could remove it. However, it's really important. What we recommend is to not rake this material. It's because even if it looks like a harmless algae, it could contain toxins, and raking can increase the risk of exposure either through inhalation or through dermal contact on your skin, especially for kids and pets that are playing near the shoreline. Last but not least, we often see gliotrichia in the lake. This is these top right photos, one's from Pine Island. They appear as really small yellow-green colonies that are generally considered a lower risk, again, because they're not forming those surface blooms. This has been present in Winnipesaukee for years. It's usually seen starting in August and then lasting through September of October. These photos to show you that even if the water necessarily looks clear or it doesn't look like there's anything on the surface, there's no thick green scum, it's worth still staying observant and knowing what to look for because not all cyanobacteria look the same. So let's talk quickly about how cyanobacteria blooms move, because it's not always where you see them is where they started. Wind and wave action are some of the biggest drivers of bloom movement. Cyanobacteria are tiny, lightweight cells that float really freely and easily, especially when they're forming those surface scums. So as a result, light winds can push these blooms across the surface of a lake or the surface of a bay even, causing them to accumulate in coves, bays, or on shorelines. So this is often why blooms are reported in one area but not another. And it's also really important to know that seeing cyanobacteria in a specific spot does not necessarily mean that it was caused by something localized, like a failing septic system or overuse of fertilizer. That wind and water movement often carry blooms from one part of the lake to another. Additionally, boat activity can play a role. So large wakes or propeller turbulence or nearshore boating can help to resuspend those cyanobacteria, both the kind that are within the water column and the type that live on the bottom, or break up patches of a bloom, spreading it to new areas. It does not hitchhike the same way as milfoil or other invasive plant species do. Beyond physical movement, some types of cyanobacteria actually have the ability to be able to regulate their own position in the water column using these really specialized cells that they have. So they have a gas vesicle cell that is a tiny air-filled structure that can help them to control their buoyancy. So that means that during the day, they can rise up towards the surface to access sunlight for photosynthesis, and then sink deeper into the water at night and access nutrients. A couple examples of species that do this are Gliotrichia and Microcystis. They're especially known for this vertical migration or movement. So blooms aren't just static. They move with the weather, they react to boat traffic, and in some cases, they can adjust their own position within the water column. But this makes monitoring challenging, and it's really why reports from the public are so valuable in being able to track bloom locations in real time. Before we wrap up the identification of blooms, it's important to talk about how a few things that are often mistaken for cyanobacteria, especially by shoreline residents or lake users that are seeing something unusual in the water. Number one, pollen. We all know it, right? Shows up in late spring. It's got kind of a dusty or grainy appearance. It doesn't necessarily mix into the water column very well. It'll usually stay floating on the top if you stir it. Totally natural, not harmful, but something to know is that cyanobacteria can attach itself to the pollen. It's something that we saw last spring and something to be aware of, which is why it's really important that, when in doubt, stay out. Nobody wants to be swimming through this anyway. Second, green filamentous algae. It's that stringy, hairy, almost cotton candy-like looking stuff that you see underneath the surface of the water, a lot of the times near docks or along the shoreline. It can feel really slimy or fuzzy, and it tends to cling to some submerged surfaces. Again, different from a bloom and not cyanobacteria, but it can sometimes trap or hide cyanobacteria within it. Duckweed, that's another common one in the bottom right down here. These are really tiny floating green leaves. They almost look like miniature lily pads. They don't discolor the entire water, but they sometimes look like these scummy patches, especially when clustered from far away. Next, iron bacteria. It's right above the duckweed. Often it's seen as an oily or rainbow-colored sheen on the water, often with a rusty orange or brownish red appearance. You will often see this near wetland outlets or culverts or drainage areas. It can smell a little like metallic or swampy sometimes, and even though it looks like pollution, it is actually caused by naturally occurring bacteria that are just reacting with iron in the soil. Lastly, didymo, or commonly known as rock snot. It forms really thick fibrous mats. They look white, tan, or brown, and it has a really unique texture, almost feels like something like wet wool or wet cotton. It clings really tightly to rocks and submerged surfaces. So these are all examples of cyanobacteria kind of look-alikes, or something that you might easily confuse for cyanobacteria. Next, who should you contact to report a bloom? The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services should always be your main contact for reporting a bloom. They have a great online reporting tool, reporting form, where if you go in, you take a few photos, you can record your location, your date, the time, and send that information directly to DES using that form. We do recommend when you're taking pictures to be able to take some photos up close as well as further away so we can really see the extent of that bloom. Now, in addition to filling out the bloom report form for DES, we are also asking you, if you are on Winnipesaukee, to share that information with LWA as well. So there is our LWA cell phone number down here at the bottom and my email as well. And then in addition to that, there is also the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Harmful Algal Bloom Hotline, Harmful Algal Bloom email. And one thing that's great about the DES site is that you can sign up for water body specific alerts. So say you're on Winnie and you only want Winnie reports, you can sign up for those. Or say you're on Lee's Pond and you only want Lee's Pond results, you can sign up for those individually. And this is an example of what the top of the bloom report form looks like. Okay, now I would like to jump down to a little bit more of a lower level or localized level, not lower level. So the Moultonborough Cyanobacteria Committee was established under the town's Conservation Commission in March of 2024. Our purpose is to be able to develop and promote a townwide strategy for addressing the environmental, social, and economic impacts of cyanobacteria blooms in Moultonborough surface waters. We focus on 3 key areas. Number 1, education and outreach. So presentations like this. We recently ordered some new brochures that are going to be in the town hall and in the library, and reaching out through local conversations. We're working to raise awareness at a local level. Through collaboration and advocacy, we coordinate really closely with the Conservation Commission, partner with other lake associations, and work alongside DES to really help strengthen the cyanobacteria response and prevention at a local level. Lastly is the Cyanobacteria Watcher program. So I will dive into this a little bit more on the next slide, but it's an opportunity for community members to take an active role in helping to monitor and protect our lakes. This map over here is showing the town boundary of Moultonborough in orange, and then these other boundaries are sub-watersheds. So everything within each sub-watershed boundary is making its way into Lake Winnipesaukee. So it's a really big area to be able to cover, and there are multiple water bodies within the greater Winnipesaukee watershed within Moultonborough. Lastly, I would just ask, if you haven't already, to follow the Moultonborough Cyanobacteria Committee page on Facebook for updates, for some photos, for volunteer opportunities, and news throughout the year. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about: becoming a cyanobacteria watcher. One of the biggest challenges with cyanobacteria is that these blooms are often really short-lived and mobile. They can appear suddenly and then move quickly with that wind or wave or boat activity and really disappear before anybody has a chance to be able to sample them. Because of that, they are incredibly difficult to track without help from the community. So right now, LWA does not have a boat. We rely heavily on our volunteers to help support our ongoing in-lake water quality monitoring efforts, as well as our cyanobacteria monitoring efforts. And DES does excellent work. They do a great job, but their cyanobacteria program is currently staffed by 1 full-time person for the entire state, with limited support from seasonal staff and some other DES staff as well. But that's why this program specifically and your involvement as Moultonborough residents is so important. So whether you're out boating, walking your dog, kayaking, or simply enjoying the view from your dock or your porch, your eyes on the water really are invaluable, especially for areas that you recreate in often. You know, whether you live on the lake or whether you recreate in a certain part of the lake fairly often, you know what to look for when the water looks off. And early detection is everything. So the faster that we know something's happening, the faster we can respond. And at the end of the day, that means fewer risks for swimmers and pets and recreational users. So there's a big benefit to creating this network of watchers. if the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services receives a bloom report, but that individual that reported the bloom either isn't responding or isn't able to follow up, or maybe they were just up vacationing and left, we can reach out to other watchers nearby to be able to confirm if the bloom is still present, understand how widespread it is. So this local coordination and communication really gives us a much better picture than just isolated reports. This QR code in the top right corner of this slide is strictly for Moultonborough residents right now, but I am working on creating a form for each town around the lake, and that information will be on the cyanobacteria page of LWA's website by the end of the month. So if you are interested in becoming a cyanobacteria watcher and live in Moultonborough, you can use this QR code to fill out that form. You can also contact our Cyanobacteria Committee Chair, Kevin Kelly, at cyanobacteria.kevinkelly@gmail.com. Or you can also email me, and I'm happy to send you that Google form if you are interested. So just a summary of kind of what we've talked about today. Stay alert. Cyanobacteria are a natural part of our lakes, but they do become a concern when conditions allow them to grow rapidly into bloom. Second, please document and report any potential or suspected bloom sightings. They, like we said, they can vary in appearance, they can move quickly, and if you see something unusual, please document and report it. And again, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is your main point of contact for this. When in doubt, stay out. If you're not sure, it's probably the safest best to stay out of the water. Build your knowledge. So not everything green is a bloom. We've talked about the green filamentous algae, pollen, didymo, iron bacteria. The more you know, the better equipped you are to be able to spot the difference between cyanobacteria and non-cyanobacteria. Just by watching this presentation, you've already taken the first step. And what we like to say is everything that's in a watershed stays within the watershed. So if you live within the Lake Winnipesaukee watershed, you have an opportunity to be able to take some steps to limit the amount of pollution, stormwater runoff that's coming off of your property and eventually entering into the lake. Be a cyanobacteria watcher. Your observations are helping to strengthen a connected, community-driven response network. So adding your name, your contact information to that form is really, really helpful. Like I said, right now, we have this Moultonborough Cyanobacteria form. I'm also working on creating ones for all the different towns around the lake, whether they have a committee or they don't have a committee. Fifth, spread the word. Education is one of our most powerful tools. So please share what you've learned with your friends, with your neighbors, with your fellow lake users. This presentation again is being recorded and will be on LWA's YouTube page. We also have some other videos as well that are great resources. You can go to our website to find out some more information. Follow the Moultonborough Cyanobacteria Committee's Facebook page. And then lastly, please support your local lake associations. We rely on community support and donations to keep us going, to be able to do presentations like these tonight. So thank you. Lastly, thank you very much for being part of it. That being said, here is my contact info. Here is our Facebook page. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, and then that is our website. With that, I would be happy to take any questions. John, do we have some questions in the chat?
We do have a question about a person asking about test kits available.
Yes. I was curious if there's test kits to be able to sample the water.
The question is if there's test kits available to sample the water for cyanobacteria specifically.
Yes.
There are not. There are test kits on the market. You can go online and find them, but unfortunately, they're not very reliable. That's just not something that's really hit the market yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Anyone else?
Are there areas of the lake that aren't being monitored? I mean, that are or aren't? I mean, are you looking for places to monitor, like to have monitors, not duplicate effort?
Yeah, for in-lake monitoring, you mean the water quality monitoring or for cyanobacteria specifically?
Yeah, just looking for cyanobacteria or monitoring, however.
Yeah, we are looking for, I need a water quality monitor in Center Harbor Bay. So if anyone is in that area and is interested, our water quality monitors for our regular in-lake program go out once a month from June to September. It takes about an hour tops to be able to do the sampling. We'll come out, we'll train you, and what we're sampling for, the parameters that we're sampling for specifically are total phosphorus, chlorophyll A, water clarity, and dissolved color. There is a interactive dashboard on our website as well that shows the water quality monitoring and results from 2016 to 2022, and I'm currently working on updating it with 2023 and 2024 data. So that's for in-lake. For cyanobacteria monitoring, anyone that wants to be a cyanobacteria watcher, we definitely welcome your participation and involvement. In terms of overlap, I think that it's not really the case when it comes to cyanobacteria. You know, you could have something washing up on your shoreline that isn't on your neighbor's shoreline. So if we have multiple people in one specific area, obviously as widespread as we can get the network, the better. But the more people that are able to sign up, the more opportunity that's going to be there for us to be able to have assistance with these sampling efforts. Any other questions?
Another question in the chat. Cyanobacteria is found. What can you do to eradicate the problem?
So once cyanobacteria are blooming and in the water body, which cyanobacteria are always in our water bodies, they're an important component to it. However, there is no quick removal for cyanobacteria, especially not on a lake the size of Lake Winnipesaukee. If you are Moultonborough residents or, just kind of paying attention to the lake-minded community, there was an alum treatment that was done on Lake Winnipesaukee to be able to help mitigate their cyanobacteria blooms. Lake Winnipesaukee was blooming for months at a time. One of them lasted from, I think it was the end of August to end of November, like 3 or 4 months of a long-term lake-wide cyanobacteria bloom. They completed a watershed management plan, which showed that a majority of their phosphorus loading was coming from internal sediment loading. The Lake Winnipesaukee Watershed Association, with a lot of their neighbors and volunteers, were able to complete the restoration projects that were identified in their watershed management plan to help limit any potential nutrient loading coming from around the watershed. They continue to do work with their boots on the ground efforts with that. But their watershed management plan showed that the majority of that loading was internal. For Lake Winnipesaukee, the watershed management plans that we have done are showing that the majority of the phosphorus loading is coming from external sources, being, polluted stormwater runoff is the major concern with that. Even with Lake Winnipesaukee alum treatment, it's not a permanent fix. So it's really, really expensive. And the Lake Winnipesaukee Watershed Association has really made some tremendous efforts to be able to be a grassroots community network fixing those problems at a small localized level. There are over 300 projects that have been identified just in the watershed management plans that we've done to date for Lake Winnipesaukee. So unfortunately, there really is no quick fix. It's limiting the amount of nutrients that are entering into our systems over the long term. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. My name is Peter. We're on Lake Wentworth, and one of the things you didn't cover was the toxicity aspect And my understanding, at least the way we take it, is we look at the density. It's mostly the gliotrachea that we have,
Mhm.
and it's based on the density that we assume it's toxic if it reaches a certain density, because I don't believe the state will test for toxicity because they just don't have the resources. Does that make sense to you? Just
Yes,
based
yes. No,
on
it definitely
density?
does. So the way that the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is issuing these warnings or these watches, they used to be called advisories, is that if the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services receives a sample and they do a cell count, and that cell count is either at or above 70,000 cells per milliliter, a cyanobacteria warning is issued. That's when those red signs go out, and different town officials are contacted. If they receive a sample and it is under that 70,000 cells per milliliter, then a watch is issued, just to almost like an active, yeah, a watch for residents to be able to be aware that that's something that is happening and available for them to be able to make their own informed decisions. But you're correct, there is no toxicity testing that is widespread and being done, especially at like a rapid level where, oh, we receive a sample and we can tell immediately if it's toxic or if it's not. There's also a ton of different types of toxins that each cyanobacteria can emit, and it's not always dependent on the one bloom. So it's not like gliotrichia always emit toxin A or B or C. It's really, really dependent on the bloom, which is why it's so important to just be informed and paying attention to where those warnings and watches and observations are being implemented and tracked.
The other thing that we're doing is we have a bunch of people that are weed watchers. You know,
Yes.
we look for milfoil, so we're just going to add cyanobacteria to their plate because they're looking at the water anyway. So we're just going to try to teach them how to identify the cyanobacteria. And your presentation, Bree, has been very good. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, yes, you're welcome. And I'm happy to, be a resource. That's a great idea and something that we're doing in Meredith and Moultonborough as well, as cross-training those weed watchers with the cyanobacteria watchers, because if you're already out on the water, then why not keep an eye out? So thank you very much for doing that on Wentworth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone was also wondering how long ice out you think will be, and if the longer ice out will change blooms this summer.
Yes, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When is ice out going to be? I've been keeping a really close eye on the Emerson Aviation Facebook page and also a couple of the different live cams that are up on Winnipesaukee. I think it will probably be, if not later this week, early next week is my guess, but it's dependent on a lot of factors, right? So mostly with the weather, less so sunlight, surprisingly, but more so if we get a lot of rain, if there's a lot of wind action, all of those sorts of things. But from what I know, the Broads is still pretty solid out there. It's anyone's guess, but if I had to guess, it would be later this week or early next week. It also depends on the weather conditions for Emerson to be able to get up and have a safe flight over the lake.
I got $5 on April 18th.
Do we have any other questions?
Very informative presentation, Bree. Thank you.
Oh, great. You're welcome. Any more in the chat, John?
Just one about if you would email the DAS reporting and LWA reporting info. If you would email the DES reporting and LWA reporting info?
So if you go to our website, which is www.winnipesaukee.org, there is a cyanobacteria page, and there is the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Healthy Swimming Mapper, and the bloom reporting form and the LWA information as well. If for any reason you can't find it, feel free to email me. We didn't have any registrations for this webinar specifically, so I don't have all of your email addresses, but if you aren't able to find it, please just use my email here. And also, I did not update the slide. I'm glad I just realized we have a new phone number. So it is not 603-581-6632. Our new phone number is 603-916-2010. That can be found on our website too, or our Facebook or anywhere that's online if you need that. But I'm glad we realized that.
Say it again, Bree, I'm sorry.
Oh, say it again. 603-916-2010.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I can go back to this this number right here, the 603-619-8703 is the LWA cell phone. So if you have any questions or can't reach our office number, you're more than welcome to call or text this number as well. Any other chat questions, John?
Nope.
Anybody else have any questions or comments, anything they'd like to add? Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, Bree. Kevin Kelly, Lake Winnipesaukee Watershed Association, and also chair of the Moultonborough Cyanobacteria Committee. We are honored to have Bree as part of our committee. She's really brought us into the scope of taking care of Moultonborough cyanobacteria problems. And I just want to thank her for what she's doing and how important it is for everyone to have a cyanobacteria committee. There are a lot of factors out there that we don't understand, and we need to learn more. And Bree and LWA are in the forefront of this technology and this hands-on work, boots on the ground effort, and we need to support them. And I just want to say very, very thankfully to Bree.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I am very, very grateful to be able to be working with you and all of our other committee members on this town-wide effort. I am also going to make a quick plug that coming up at Lakes Congress this year, there is going to be a panel for a few different cyanobacteria committees. So if you haven't heard of that before, it's a conference that New Hampshire Lakes puts on. It's great. We'll be there. We'll have a table. If you want to talk to us in person or, learn some more about the things that are going on statewide, it's a great conference to be able to attend. All right. Well, it looks like we are out of questions. I just want to take a moment and thank you all for being here tonight. Really, like I said, it makes a huge difference to be able to build your local knowledge and spread the word, and just learning about LWA and the work that we're doing. It means a lot to me. So thank you very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you, Bree.
Thank you.
Much
Thank you, Bree.
appreciated.
Bye.
Bye.